everybody, it's Ajene from Life with Ajene. I'm back with another intro to Black philosophy video. Yay! Okay, so today's video, I am going to be talking about something that came at the request of actually someone early on in my videos. I wish I could have gotten to this sooner, but there's just so much going on that I want to cover in this channel, so thank you all for being patient with me. I have 2 small children, multiple jobs right now.
It's a lot. Yeah.
I'm just trying to keep up, but I'm passionate about this, so I want to keep it going. Anyway, back to what I was saying. This came at the request of someone from one of my earlier videos, my intro video. And this person said, cannot wait to hear your thoughts on how we approach a Black phenomenology and existentialism, to the extent that you think that those schools are useful to the Black philosophy project. For one, I think those are useful to the Black philosophy project. What the Black philosophy project is, I'm reading that in a certain way, I'll get to that later. But what I'll say right now is that today's video, because of this comment, I'm gonna be talking about Black phenomenology and existentialism. And I'm going to be giving examples of people who actually do those things and show those things in their work, and I'll answer a question after that. So just as a recap, what am I gonna do in this video today? First, I'm gonna go over phenomenology and existentialism and what those are. Second, I'm going to give examples of Black philosophers who utilize those tools in their work. And then third, I'm going to then answer that question more specifically from my own context, my own opinions. So, thanks for coming along. Let's jump right in there so we can get on with this video.
Let's do it.
So, phenomenology and existentialism, what are those?
What are those?
Let's start off with phenomenology. Phenomenology is a field of philosophy in which we study phenomena and what that means for your existence, right? So in this context, phenomena are different things that your body senses in the world. Things you hear, see, touch, taste, smell, right? The senses, when they're sensing, you are taking in different phenomena in the world, and you can observe and analyze those things to be able to tell you some truths or some understandings about your reality. Now, that's on an individual basis, right? You can practice phenomenology on an individual basis and start to analyze and understand some things about your reality, your existence. But you could also, over time, accumulate other people's experiences and relate those to yours, see how they're connected, and then you might be able to actually draw some broader observations about reality for broader groups of people who share those experiences with you. So if you live out in the world and you smell things in a certain way, and this tells you something about your reality, well, you can look at other people who smell things in a certain way. And then when you look at the collection of those data points, then you might be able to say, okay, well, there are people in the world who smell things in this way, and this is what life looks like for them. This is what life means for them.
This is life. You are looking at life.
Now, that was a really arbitrary thing. I thought smell was just kind of a funny example there. But that's a real basic look at phenomenology. If you want a more in-depth, lengthy look at phenomenology, because it's a really interesting field, I can post some references below. Just leave a comment if you want more. There's plenty of people that I think explain this simply, but give you a more in-depth view that I'm not gonna give here because I want these videos to be short.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's phenomenology. Now, existentialism. Existentialism is basically a field of philosophy in which we're questioning, what's the point of human existence?
Why are we all here again?
Why are we here? Why does it matter? Does it matter? And so phenomenology and existentialism actually go hand in hand. Why is that? Well, on one hand, with phenomenology, you are observing and understanding what existence is, trying to draw truths or different analysis points about reality, about existence, either individually or on a broader group basis, depending on how you're looking at data. But doing phenomenology tells you something about existence. And in existentialism, if you're questioning what's the point of existence, then you can use phenomenology to kind of inform that question that happens in existentialism. Phenomenology might tell you, maybe these are some points of existence. Or if it doesn't tell you that this is the point of existence, it can at least give you a better understanding of what existence is. So these things go hand in hand. And I'll get more into how these things matter at that last part of the video, in my opinion, and how they matter for what we're gonna call the Black Philosophy Project. So that's your intro to those topics. Now, it's my time to introduce you to some philosophers who show this perspective in their work. I'm going to talk about two entities. I'm going to talk about our first philosopher because they wrote first. There's no like favoritism going on there with that. It's just they wrote their work first. And then I'm going to talk about the collective second because theirs came second. So our first philosopher that I'm going to be talking about, James Baldwin. So a little bit of context on James Baldwin. James Baldwin is often recognized as an author, an American writer, and civil rights activist. Yes, that is true. But I would argue, of course, because I'm referencing him here, that James Baldwin is also a philosopher.
That's right.
James Baldwin does all kinds of really engaging critical thought in his writing. He does fiction, but he does nonfiction. He has done some public talks and speeches and debates on shows that you can look up really easily here on YouTube. He's incredible. And so James Baldwin, today I'm referencing a work that he wrote or at least was published in 1955. The book is called Notes of a Native Son. Now for that, I don't have a free link for that book, but what I can recommend is that you look at your local library. For me, I looked up different things I could read by James Baldwin from my local library, and I got an ebook instantly. I would be shocked if your library did not have Notes of a Native Son by James Baldwin. It's a very, very, very popular text. James Baldwin is a very popular writer, and this book is one of his like more popular texts. So yes, if you want to check this one out, this is going to be one of those things where you're going to want to check your library. This is also part of why I have two options here, because one of them you can get for free. Okay, so in Baldwin's book, Notes of a Native Son, he has a chapter called The Harlem Ghetto, which is in part 2 of the book. Now, where James Baldwin is doing phenomenology in this chapter, well, James Baldwin is from Harlem. And so in this chapter, he talks about his direct experiences in Harlem and what he's observed about what that means for his life and what he's observed about what that's meant for Black people broadly in this country and experiences that they've had. So he's doing his own analysis based on what he's seen directly and in his own life. And then he says, you know, these are the things that I also see around me and what that means for Black people. By him doing that and expressing those personal experiences and connecting that to a broader context of how those things matter, that's an example of phenomenology.
That's it.
And I want to say this in general. Anytime you hear somebody talking about their personal experience and saying, this is what it's like to live as X, right? That usually is getting into some kind of phenomenological analysis, right? If not an analysis, at least an expression that you could use to build up an analysis. So yes, anytime you're out here and they're like, oh my gosh, this is what it's like to live as X. This is what it's like to live as a Black woman. This is what it's like to live as a queer person. This is what it's like to live as a white woman. This is what it's like to, all those examples, those are people, you know, dipping their toes in the water. I won't say if they're going past that or not. That's up for you to observe. So yeah, in this chapter, Baldwin talks about a bunch of different things. He talks about the shape of his neighborhood and talks about that in relation to politics. He talks about the press and how those things matter or don't matter. He talks about churches and experiencing those things and how that sets up different perspectives in life. He talks about a Black-Jewish tension and how that matters and really how it's a failed setup that's rooted in white supremacy. He doesn't say it that way, but like when you analyze it, he's connecting the tension back to a state of white supremacy and whiteness being dominant and playing off of minorities battling with one another, not being able to trust one another.
Sound familiar?
So, yeah, some examples, some powerful quotes that I found from this that give you more of an understanding of what this might sound like when somebody's expressing some phenomena in their life and how you can use that in phenomenology. Baldwin opens up this chapter in the Harlem Ghetto by saying, Harlem, physically at least, has changed very little in my parents' lifetime or in mine. Now as then, the buildings are old and in desperate need of repair. The streets are crowded and dirty. There are too many human beings per square block. Rents are 10 to 58% higher than anywhere else in the city. Food, expensive everywhere, is more expensive here and of an inferior quality. And now that the war is over and money is dwindling, Clothes are carefully shopped for and seldom bought. Negroes, traditionally the last to be hired and the first to be fired, are finding jobs harder to get, and while prices are rising implacably, wages are going down. All over Harlem now, there is felt the same bitter expectancy with which, in my childhood, we awaited winter. It is coming, and it will be hard. There is nothing anyone can do about it. So I just think that that is so descriptive of just like a really harsh reality and strained conditions, but it's also telling you there's a certain kind of understanding that this is just something you're gonna have to bear and deal with, and this is nothing new, right? And so what we can observe about this experience and understand, and Baldwin goes on to do his own like explanation of what that means, but what you can take away from that, just even at first look, is that, man, there's a life here that's attention, and in contrast with these other kinds of lifestyles, right, it's taxed at a higher rate, there's less money, and people are struggling a little to nothing, but just tucking their head down and grinding it out. And you might question then, what does that mean about this kind of existence? What kind of value is placed on these lives? Is there any value placed on these lives? What does this mean? Like, why do people have to be treated this way? Are these considered people? Are these considered humans, persons? Right? This might lead you into a bunch of questions. And those questions are starting to touch into a phenomenological analysis, but also getting back into that existentialism piece, because again, we question in existentialism, what is the point of human life?
Yeah, what is our purpose?
So that's there. I'm gonna read one more quote from this chapter that I just thought was really powerful. It's at the end of the chapter. Baldwin says, I can conceive of no Negro native to this country who has not, by the age of puberty, been irreparably scarred by the conditions of his life. That there is so powerful, because he's saying that by puberty, he can't identify not one person who hasn't been irreparably scarred from just living as a Black person in this country.
Oh my God.
That matters a lot. Because what that has to say about reality, what that has to say about existence, what that has to say about a Black experience, is that life as a Black person in this country is so set up for failure, is so harsh, is so cruel, that you don't escape childhood without having irreparable damage in your life. So that, what that says about a Black experience, a Black life, at least in the context of the borders of this country, is that it is unforgivably damaging. It is cruel without any kind of care or concern for what it means to be a child. And we can say a lot of other things there. But I think that statement, you can take that and just, you can write books and books and books and books on that and what that means and what that looks like, and trying to understand and analyze that from various experiences, whether you agree with it or not. But that is a very powerful statement that I think you can take in phenomenology and just whoosh, go. Okay, I'm stopping there with James Baldwin. We can go on and on and on and on. I'm thinking about actually doing a James Baldwin like reading group on here, some kind of like book chapter, book club. I don't know. I'm gonna figure it out, but we'll get to that later. The second collective that I'm gonna be talking about is no one before has ever examined the multi-layered texture of Black women's lives. How we approach a Black phenomenology and existentialism to the extent that I think that it matters.